Hi guys! Today we're going to be finishing up our talk about worship with a man named Abraham. Stay tuned. Before we get into our talk about worship, let's have a little fun and play a little game of Would You Rather. Our first question today is, would you rather get a tattoo with an obvious misspelling of the word? So instead of saying like Psalm 23, it would say Palm 23. Or instead of regret, it would say like ragret or something. I don't know. Some obvious misspelling of a word. Or get something with a company logo on you. McDonald's. Oh. Starbucks. Whatever. Question number 2. Would you rather take a train across country? So we're going to say like the West Coast. And sit up in it. No sleeping car. Just a chair for the entire trip. Or drive your car and have to stay in Motel 6s. Question 3. Plain and simple. Which one would you rather eat? Sweet potato pie? Blackberry pie? 3 questions, 3 answers. Let me hear from you. How you doing with all this snow, all this cold, and now dripping weather? Let me know. How are you doing with your devotions? Taking time for God? Putting Him first? It's no longer January and resolution time of the year. I want to hold you to those choices you made a month ago, so many weeks ago. Today our memory verse is going to be from Luke chapter 4 verse 8, where it says, Jesus answered, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve Him only." Luke 4:8. Jesus answered, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve Him only." Today we're finishing up our look at what worship is and how we can celebrate God. Today we're going to understand by how we celebrate God by showing Him our love and obedience. Today's story comes from the life of the great father of all Israel, Father Abraham, and his son Isaac. God told Abraham that he's going to have to do something very difficult. A difficult choice. He learned how to obey God and to worship Him while doing it. Showing us and teaching us the importance of worshiping God through obedience. Today's lesson comes from Genesis chapter 22. We're going to start at the beginning, verse 1. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, "Abraham, here I am. Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. Go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." So Abraham got up early in the morning, saddled his donkey with 2 of his young men and his son Isaac. He split wood for a burnt offering and set out to go to the place God had told him about. All right, let's unpack this because there's a lot of background information we need to learn about. God is testing Abraham, plain and simple, to see if he would obey and completely. That's all. This is the entire setting up for it. This is the why this is happening. The how is God's told him to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Isaac is a very special person. He was the son that God had promised to Abraham so many years ago. This important and special boy who took decades from this promise to be born. Decades. His only son, the son that Abraham was supposed to pass down his legacy, the one that God told him that a great nation would come from. This is Isaac. And now God is telling him to kill him. And not just kill him, but sacrifice him as a burnt offering. So, in the time of the temple, Jewish people would go regularly to offer a sacrifice to God for the cover Not cleanse, but just cover their sins. They would do this by bringing an animal, or they have specific rules. Sometimes it would be grain, sometimes it would be liquid, but a lot of times there's animal, and offer it as a burnt offering, where they would kill the animal, drain its fluids, put it on the altar, and where the fire would burn it, and it would cover their sins to God. Not permanently, just temporarily, though. The permanent one who can take away our sins would Jesus Christ on his death on the cross for us. And this is what God is telling Abraham to do. And you know what's weird? Weird to me? Verse 3. And Abraham got up early in the morning and went. There's no questions, there's no recorded oddness or guilt or anxiety, nothing. Just got up, they went. Brought his animals for the travel, the things that need to be done, his servants, and the two men went. There's no arguing. There's no expression of anger. Just Abraham trusted God and obeyed. In verse 5, we continue where it says, Then Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go there to worship and will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, laid it on his son Isaac. In his hand he took the fire and the knife, and the two of them walked together. Still, no complaining and arguing from Abraham, but after day 3, they get there. And they get to the place where God had told him to kill his son. Do you ever wonder about what they talked about in this journey? Did Abraham, show any, live every day is your last type of deal? Going through, my favorite, recapping his life. My favorite memories of you were, they didn't have any podcasts or music to listen to. What was Abraham thinking about? Was he worrying? Was he stressing out? Or did he just trust God completely? I'd like to think it's that. Something for us all to live and strive for. Just completely trusting God, even though we may not understand. And Abraham takes Isaac up to the mountain, leaves the servants behind. God said just for Abraham and Isaac to go. And verse 5 and 6 show something really odd. Because in verse 5 it says Abraham and Isaac are what they're bringing. They're bringing the fire, they're bringing the knife, they're bringing the wood, they're bringing Isaac. Do you know what's missing? The animal. If Abraham is bringing everything needed for sacrifice, he was prepared to kill Isaac. There was no animal that he don't bring just in case God changes his mind. No. God said to sacrifice his son. He was prepared to do it. Abraham was prepared to kill as directed, not worship. He was ready to follow it and obey. He wasn't going to be like, well, I'll just kind of stay in here until God changes his mind. No. Abraham was ready to do exactly as God told him to do, and that's an amazing act of obedience just right there. In chapter 22, verse 7 and 8, Isaac speaks up and says, Isaac spoke to his father, Abraham, and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. Isaac said, The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham replied, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Then the two of them walked together. Okay. Isaac finally the light bulb clicks, goes, all right, we got everything we need, our checklist. Wood, altar, knife, fire. Wait a minute, where's the animal? And then he asked, and this, again, shows the insight of how Abraham is working. It took Isaac 3 days to figure this out, and obviously it took Abraham knew this automatically. Abraham said that God will provide. He didn't say, you're the sacrifice. No. He was prepared to kill him. We have seen that. But the interesting thing is, even though Abraham was going to kill Isaac, as God said, he still believed that God would provide and do something. That could be a lot of different things. That maybe he thought that God would provide another animal, that God would bring Isaac back from the dead, that God would do anything. But he was really following and obeying so that they could worship God together. Isaac is a special, special boy, but not more special than God. And Abraham knew that he trusted God no matter, and was going to do no matter what. That if he wanted to take this special son away from him, he would, because he's the God who can also bring him back from the dead. Now here comes the difficult part, verse 9 and 10. When they arrived at the place that God had told him about, Abraham built the altar and arranged the wood. He bound his son Isaac, placed him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out, took the knife to slaughter his son. So Abraham, by this age in his life, knew how to build an altar. It was something that Jewish people did. They knew how to worship God. And he does everything needed. He builds the altar, puts on the wood, lights the fire, starts binding up Isaac. Didn't Isaac say something like, "What are you doing?" I don't understand. Isaac should have put two and two together, and we don't have any record of that. Doesn't mean he didn't say it, but Isaac should have realized, wait a minute, am I the animal? Is my dad going to kill me? It goes as far as Isaac takes his knife and puts fingers to the throat, ready to kill. Until verse 11. In verse 11 it says, "But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, saying, Abraham, Abraham! Here I am." What did God got the knife to the throat, fingers to the throat. "Abraham!" "Yeah? Here I am. Yeah, what do you need?" Verse 12 though, "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son from me." Abraham looked and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horn. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it in his burnt offering in the place of his son. God calls out and stops this right before it happens, with just a knife imprint to the throat of Isaac. Perfect timing by God. Makes you kind of wonder, who was happier in this moment, Abraham or Isaac? But God commanded Abraham not to kill Isaac, because he knew this was a test. We said that already. A test of his faith and obedience in God. Abraham was willing to give God everything in his life, including his most precious son. And he obeyed God completely, even though he didn't make sense, even though it took away something that was special to him. And this is a lesson for us on obeying God. Obey God, even though it may not make sense to us. God does not make mistakes. We trust him completely. And they were able to sacrifice and celebrate, because they found a locally sourced ram in the bushes, and they prepared it to sacrifice to God in a celebration, no longer of their son dying, but of God sparing Isaac. In 15, because of Abraham passing this test of his faith, God showed Abraham the promise that he made to him in verse 15. "Then the angel of the Lord called to him a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, this is the Lord's declaration, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your only son. I will indeed bless you and make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky and the sand of the seashore. Your offspring will possess the city gates of their enemies, and all the enemies of the earth will be blessed by your offspring, because you have obeyed my commands." Because Abraham's great faith, God promised Abraham a lot of things. This is a covenant between Abraham and God, where it will not be broken by God. The first was that he will bless Abraham. Secondly, he will make Abraham's offspring more than the stars in the sky, more than the sand on the beach. That is a lot. Overwhelmingly a lot. This is especially important because it was just Abraham and Isaac at this time period. There was not a giant family. He just had one son. And now God's telling him, I will make you, your offspring, numerous. They will inherit a land of their enemy, which we now call nation of Israel. And all humans will be blessed on earth because of your faith. Yeah, because of Abraham, Father Abraham, we are all blessed and greatly because of his faith in God, because of what he did and how he established the nation of Israel. Wonderful. Because Abraham obeyed God, even though he was in a hard spot with this calling to sacrifice his son, Abraham trusted and loved God completely. And most importantly, we've now learned that obedience is another form of worship. We can worship and obey God. We choose to do what's right and have a heart that wants to please God and show him how we love him. We do that by worship. Don't forget to worship God with your life. Obey completely. See you next time.